Hey everyone, welcome back to Todos Santos. Today we're going to begin a 5-episode long project of filling in the western side of the map. This episode, we're going to start by filling in this island. Let's go. I took inspiration for this build from the Isla de Cabras near San Juan. I think it's technically in nearby Catano. But there are a lot of interesting features. There are some old Spanish defenses, there's an old leper colony, several recreation options, a nice beach, that kind of stuff. So we're going to be building not all of those things, but some of those things, and fitting it to the needs of Todos Santos. But before we get to any of that, we have to actually connect it up to the pre-existing road network. So I'm just taking our divided highway that runs through the small town of Esperanza and squeezing it down into a two-way road that runs across this nice little causeway. So I guess technically it's not really an island anymore since we've connected it via land, but I don't think that's too important. The land that sticks out on either side is just a little bit too wide for my taste. So we're going to take these terraforming roads, drop them down to a certain height, and just squeeze them in as much as we can before we start getting these ugly terrain glitches. And to really sell it, or at least hopefully sell it, we're going to add some of these nice jetty rock assets. I'll link those down in the description if you're interested in checking those out for yourself. They're a lot more detailed and nicer than some of the rocks I've used previously. We have very dedicated road maintenance guys here in Todos Santos. One of the main draws of using this island for inspiration is that it has a cool Spanish fort on it. This is going to complete our line of defense, so we now have a trio of forts and castles defending the waterways of Todos Santos. Of course, they're no longer needed for defense for the most part, at least hopefully not. So they're now just tourist attractions, which honestly makes sense. With this kind of island, you would have lots of people coming here anyway to see the sights and hang out on the beach, and of course, to see this as well. I'm using this stone key asset just made into a square with the corners sharpened with node controller. There was a little bit of weird terrain that stuck up in the middle that I couldn't seem to flatten out, so I just basically have some ploppable pavement on top and then a brick wall network making up the difference in between the key asset and the pavement. Because this is going to be the last historic fortification in the city, I wanted to get the details a little bit more accurate than I have previously. So I decided to put a little bit more effort with PO into making these battlements look good and getting that iconic look that you get with these Spanish forts. So I take this old stone stair asset, just delete most of the vertices so that we're just working with the brick box, basically, that's on the back. And then I just drag some of these nodes to get the right angles and get something that looks a little bit like the right type of battlement. So once I get the right shape, I'm just going to make sure that it looks at approximately the right scale by dragging another one over here and then having the same texture in the middle just by lowering the same thing down in between. Now, of course, we also have to have an iconic garita sentry box on the corner here overlooking the sea. Now, one problem we have is we have a whole bunch of different colors here, so I need to make the sentry box look a little bit bluer and the stone battlements look a little bit more red, so they kind of meet each other halfway and hopefully look at least somewhat similar. Initially, I had the access to the sentry box blocked off, so I need to get rid of those and have these angled pieces here that, I don't know, I find this very satisfying how it ends up with this little path in between the battlements over to the garita. I thought it would be kind of cool, instead of having the fort inland like it initially was, or at least just a little bit inland, I wanted to have it kind of out on this promontory right at the corner of the island. And what we're going to do is take these terraforming roads and just bring this little strip of land around what is eventually going to be the beach by this red path here, so that we have this nice, calm, I don't know what you would call it, but it would be the area where you would go swimming if you went to this beach. So as I started working on the shore, I realized that this fort being out on a promontory right on the ocean is going to have a lot of wear and tear, and so I wanted to represent that in the details. So we're going to go back really quickly and just finish up this detailing really fast with a whole bunch of decals. I'm doing a mix of stain, damage, and moss decals, and a few tufts of grass here and there, just where things have worn down over time. Of course, they would probably do some maintenance on this now and then, but that would be a pretty expensive prospect to keep it up perfectly. And of course, we have the trick that I used back in episode 1 with the castle, with these giant seaweed decals layered on top of the wall to make it look like there's, I don't know, like algae growing there, I guess. Now I realized I had this like stone box just sitting here with no way to actually get up there, so I don't know if this is actually how it would be in real life or if it's even realistic, but I thought there might be like this little access tunnel up through the fort, so you would enter here. Of course, they now have a entrance for tourists and maintenance and stuff, so they have their own modern steps and door installed, but previously it would have just been, you know, a stone entrance and some stone steps up to the top of the fort. Okay, moving on from all the old stuff on this island, we're going to add some more modern amenities along the beach. This stuff is pretty much directly taken from the Isla de Cabras. So they have these green pavilions. I assume you could, you know, either just grab one or rent one out and set up along the beach, which seems like it'd be pretty nice. They also have these kind of iconic looking green roofs. So I'm going to just quickly go into PO, add a color rectangle, and set it to green. So we have all these nice, consistent looking roofs along here. There's also this main pavilion, so I'm just sizing it up a little bit and giving it an appropriately scaled concrete floor so you could actually, you know, have people here and host events and stuff. I really like the detail on this asset. You can see the stairs and the decorative railing here. I just think that looks really nice. As you probably know if you've been keeping up with the series, Todos Santos is a very car-centric city, so we're going to have a couple parking areas. One of them is going to be over here by the fort and the beach. Just going to quickly make that. I'm copying and pasting these lengths of plain road, stretching the ends out with node controller so that we can just cover a little bit more surface area with it, if that makes any sense. That's just a very easy way to get some nice and good-looking coverage without having to plop down a bunch of decals. And then I also clip some functional parking down into it so that we can actually get people to use this, because we're going to get quite a few visitors here once we get into making this functional. But before we get to that, I wanted to get to the next main feature of the island and do a little bit of detailing. So what we're starting here is the boat trailer parking, because I think one of the main reasons to come here in the first place, as opposed to other places in the city, is there is fantastic access to the water and to all the waterways of Todos Santos in general. You can get from here to the bay or to the lagoon or really anywhere that you want. So there's quite a bit of parking available. Of course, it's extra long so that it can fit a vehicle and a trailer for a boat as well. I tried doing it with IMT at first, but it actually was harder to get the right size and tiling of the lines, if that makes any sense, with IMT. So I just did it with props, measured out with our truck prop and boat trailer prop. I did do a little bit of IMT stuff with this red curb, which is going to serve to make these planters in between the various angles of parking. But of course, some of that I didn't feel like fiddling around with IMT too much because our segments didn't necessarily line up with where the planter was going to go. So we need to do some of it manually as well with the network version and fill it all in with some PO ploppable dirt. Make some Pac-Men with the PO. And I'm just going to quickly finish doing that. And then we're going to get to the actual boat launch itself. Of course, we need a place where people can back up and drop their boats into the water and vice versa. So I'm using this pre-made boat launch asset, which I thought looked pretty nice. And it also has a built-in crane, which is kind of cool. Okay, I promised that we would make this place functional, so let's do that. Of course, the first step is to turn it into a park life park. That's going to give us a lot more flexibility in terms of the sort of stuff we can place down and how easily people are going to want to come here. Now, one thing I was thinking of while I was making it functional is pigs. There aren't any goat assets on the workshop, at least that I could find, so I decided to make it Pig Island, Isla de Cabras. Also, as I was looking through the park menu, I noticed that a lot of people like the Northern Coast Park for some reason. So let's just draw this park area out so we can cover everything, and that's going to allow us to more easily put down some of these functional buildings. I have some people generators, just putting them down under a few of these pavilions. We also have an entertainment block within the fort itself, just to represent that people would come here to see that. It needs some road access, and we're also going to sneak in a little maintenance area back here, which also needs road access. I'm going to clip a park maintenance block building into this nice little plain industrial building. And that way we'll get some of these park maintenance cars spawning out of there. Finally, we're going to clip a ferry stop into the boat launch and connect that up to our private boat ferry line that we have running all across the waterways of Todos Santos. My first plan for the tip of this island was just to leave it natural and full of trees and stuff, but I eventually changed my mind and thought it would be kind of cool to have this little dirt road running out, and we're going to have a restaurant or cafe at the end of it. I'm using the Café Poet by Wee. That's linked in the description if you like the look of this asset. It's really nice to put on sloped areas, or in this case, on the shore. We're going to detail that up in just a second, but first I wanted to make this little fishing dock. Just using the dock surface by Ronix and a couple of the supports as well. Now, even though this is kind of out in the middle of nowhere and far away from everything else on the island, I figured it would be a pretty busy destination because it's such a nice location and there's not really much else like it in the city. So it's pretty packed up with parking just on a very basic dirt parking lot. I thought this asset was so nice that I didn't want to mess with it too much, but I did want to give it the detailing attention that it deserved. So you have a little menu out front, some ads, and we're going to block it off from parking immediately in front of it with these barriers. There's also a bike rack built in, so I just wanted to put a couple of bikes there. There were a couple brave souls who decided to bike down the skinny dirt road to this place. So in contrast to the couple of small beach areas that we have on the island, most of it is pretty rocky. So I'm using these coastal rocks by Ronix. Of course, it doesn't quite match our map theme because we're not using the coastal map theme, but I think we can get a nice contrast going with these darker rocks that they look like they're above water now, but that's just because we did some terraforming, so there's a small tsunami going on, but the water's going to come back and fill all of that in, and so it's going to be just about the water line where it transitions from the dark rocks to the lighter ones. Of course, I just need to fine-tune that with these terraforming roads to make sure that the water level is correct compared to the rocks. In a minute, we're going to put down some trees on the other side of the beige rocks, and I think that's really going to sell the effect, but we'll get to that in just a second. I did want to have more variation to the kind of the silhouette of the rocks, if that makes any sense, than just this single line along the shore. So I sized these up, I think by pressing the period key, and have them at various sizes and rotations along here, and that's going to give us some freedom. So when we come down and paint those trees in a bit, we're going to be able to draw some more interesting curved lines with the edge of the forest, and it's going to look a lot more organic, so to speak. I mean, rocks aren't organic. Now, I had the problem with the edge of these darker, wet rocks, where I wanted the water to look like it was splashing up against this whole mess of rocks down here. But obviously these are seafoam decals, so I can't really raise them up without putting them on a surface or anything. So I just end up putting them underwater, and I think it actually looks okay from above, which is mainly the look I'm going for here. Obviously, when you zoom in, you can see it's underwater. It doesn't really make any sense, but I think from a distance you get, you get the feeling that the whole ocean's coming up and crashing up against the rocks. And to double down on that effect, we're going to use these functional wave buildings, which I just absolutely love. And I'm going to plaster this whole area with those. For some reason, they seem to always place just a little bit above sea level for me. I don't know why that is. If I'm doing something wrong, probably. I always have to zoom in, put my camera at a really awkward angle, and lower them down so that they're at sea level. Anyway, I lowered them down a little bit, saw this tsunami crashing over these poor little pigs, and decided to give them some names. If you want to name one of these pigs, let me know down in the comments. First come, first serve. This build together is all the natural stuff, so the trees and the beaches and all that kind of stuff. So I want to set a good base for that. We're starting with some sand decals where sand is being kicked up or blown over across the path there, which I think gives them a really nice effect. And then of course we also need lots of grass, and I don't think the plain grass texture is going to cut it for this build, so we're getting a nice canvas to work with a bunch of these mountain grass props, which I have placed pretty much all over the city. I just really like how these look, and they're fantastic for just plastering your city with and then covering it up with trees, and you can just see little bits poking out here and there, and it just really serves to kind of fill in the underbrush of your forests. At the Isla de Cabras, there's a barge that ran aground near the island and is still there to this day. The only information I could find on the real-life counterpart to our sunken ship here is that it's been there since at least 1976, so not too long ago. But other than that, I can't really find much information on it. And the source I looked at said it had no information about the previous owners, which is kind of interesting to think about something happening relatively recently in a fairly populated place, and there's no information available about who ran aground in this ship. I assume someone out there remembers this and has some information about it, but it's not accessible to us, so I think it's going to be the same thing in Todos Santos, where it's just going to be a mystery as to what was going on when that barge ran aground. But anyway, I wanted, because we have this shallow water here in between the island and the mainland, I wanted to have some nice, interesting details under the shallow water, just to contrast it with the deeper water on the other side of the island. So we have some grass just standing in for seaweed, and I lighten the color up a little bit by switching the texture with Surface Painter. Now we're going to work our way back to the island. I wanted to do something a little bit different than just the usual crash barriers, so we have some of these jetty rocks. They come in individual boulders, so I just copy and paste those along the whole length of the causeway and lower them down a little bit, so they're just little bits sticking up that theoretically would keep the cars from driving off into the water, hopefully at least. And the next step is to put down, well, first some more rocks, and then a whole bunch of trees. We're going to kind of have two passes for this. So one is the more landscape trees. These probably would have been planted there when they created this recreation site fairly recently, but not so recently that the trees haven't grown to full height. So for the landscaping trees, it's pretty much just palm trees. We're going to add a few acacias and oaks as well, just to get a little bit of variation in texture, and also a couple of these amazing coconut trees, which I've honestly been neglecting on the series recently. So now that we're doing these kind of shore-based builds, I'm going to be adding more of those in here. I love the ones that stick out over the water. But then we also have these acacias as well. I think those have a nice balance of like manicured and wild look to them, and they have a really nice canopy. So we're going to use some of those. I also downloaded these trees of heaven. I'm not familiar with the real-life tree, but I thought they had kind of the right look for this type of landscaping tree. And then we're also going to come in and do some of these grass strips and medians with some various hedges. So we have some plain ones, a couple of different flowering versions, and then some of Delmo's nice wild bushes. So before I mentioned that we were going to have 2 passes, and now we're doing the second one, which is basically creating kind of the more natural woods that you would have found here originally on the island. The inspiration is not very forested. There's, I think, like 1 or 2 little clusters of trees. I wanted, this is Todos Santos. It's covered in trees, so I wanted to cover the island in trees now that we've gotten all the main features down. So one thing that's going to feed into that is having this layer of grass around pretty much all of the developed parts. So along the roads, along the parking lots, and that's just going to serve to transition from the ground level all the way up into the forest canopy, because it can look a little weird to just have a pile of trees right on top of a perfectly flat ground. It doesn't look very good. So I start with that, and then we're going to go in and fill any remaining gaps with our random forest brush that I created quite a while ago. For smaller areas like this, I like to set it to minimum size and strength, and that way you're just putting down 1 tree at a time, but it's randomizing it. So it's kind of nice. You get the best of both worlds. You get the precision of copying and pasting a tree with Move It, but you get the random variation of the forest brush mod. And then, of course, for these bigger areas, I can either copy and paste clusters with Move It for some of the medium-sized spaces, and then any larger spaces, you can just use the brush itself. Of course, you have to bring the strength back up if you're going to do that. Otherwise, it's just not going to put down any trees. I'm leaving some little clearings for our feral pigs here. I mostly just didn't want to cover them up with trees, but you could imagine, they might gravitate toward the kind of open grassland where they can get a little sunlight. I don't know if pigs actually like that, but the pigs in Todos Santos do. I'm going to take this fishing dock and add it over here so that we can have 2 of them. I thought 1 tiny little fishing dock wasn't really exactly what you would find at a big recreational park like this. You have a little pull-off, so you could park here. Really only room for like 1 or 2 cars, maybe. And just squeeze the end of this segment down so that it lines up more or less evenly with the end of the dock. A couple of bollards, obviously, so you can't drive out on the dock. That wouldn't be the best idea ever. So while we may be done with the Isla de Cabras, there's still a little bit more to do this episode, which is just taking care of some of the surroundings on the mainland. We're going to build basically what amounts to no more than just a roadside pull-off with a couple of businesses here. I'm using this Sam's Beach Bar asset. It comes from the same pack, actually, as the pavilions we used before. Really nice building, and just filling up the patio with some tables and umbrellas and stuff. And we're going to add a few more restaurants here as well. This is going to end up connecting with the town that we're going to build over the next couple episodes. Of course, this place would be pretty popular, I imagine, with the big recreation site just across the causeway, so there's quite a bit of parking here. I was vaguely inspired for this by a place called the Luquillo Kiosks, which is basically just a strip of small restaurants and shops along the beach east of San Juan. Obviously, this isn't a full recreation of that because these are pretty big buildings, but that might be something that I would be interested in recreating elsewhere, assuming we can find a spot for it. Also, if you've been around since the teaser trailer for Todos Santos 5 years ago, this is where I filmed that. I just made up a little beach area over here. So we finally have come full circle and come back to that. And unfortunately, we have to delete all those details because we're going to add a beach that's more in line with the style of building that we're doing now. In contrast to what we did on the island, there's just this dirt access road that goes out to the beach. There's no parking lot or anything. We're doing the same technique with the grass along the road. These sand decals representing sand that's been brought up all the way to the road. Some dirt decals just to show some wear and tear in between the road and the grass. And then a little bit of a reference back to that little scene that I made for the teaser trailer. Seems like a couple people are having a pretty good day on the beach, although they're nowhere to be seen, so maybe not such a good day. I don't know. So we're going to finish up this episode with just a little bit more of some nature detailing, really quite similar to what we did on the island, just doing it this time for the shoreline. So we have these nice seafoam decals, the animated seafoam, and I didn't feel like making a sandy beach all the way along the shore here, so a lot of this is going to be rocky. And then when we come back and paint some trees, we're going to try to overlap it with the rocks just so we get this nice skinny line of rocks sticking out, because I didn't want there to be like a broad rocky shore. That didn't really feel like what I was going for. And of course, I forgot to put down some of these fantastic acai trees. I love these clusters So what I've been doing to make the forests look a little bit more realistic is just use our forest brush setting to get these generic low poly trees down, and then along like roads or waterways or paths or anything like that where I might be taking some screenshots or doing some cinematics, I take those Asai clusters and add a few of those here and there, and it's actually kind of impressive how quickly it makes it go from looking like a bland and generic forest into something that could believably be tropical. Of course, that doesn't necessarily apply to what we're doing right now, because I'm taking the forest brush and painting over the hills on this side of Todos Santos. And this is something that we're going to have to do this because we're nearing the building limit, we're nearing the node limit, and I'm not going to be able to fill in the whole map. So I think a good way to skirt around that problem is to just have the hills be forested, and it gives a really nice silhouette when you look at any part of the city aiming toward the hills. You get these nice rolling hills in the background, and they're all covered in trees, and it just gives a really nice look. We're just doing a little bit, just having a little taste test of that this episode, but we're going to be doing a lot of that as we go through the next few episodes, filling this whole area in. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Todos Santos. I really hope you enjoy your time in the city today, and I can't wait to see you on the next one. Bye-bye.